Hello and welcome to another hot evening here in London, and today n=35 I would like to talk about some hot new features that are in 3.09 of MvvmCross. And these new features they come in a family called Tibet binding. And the new features I particularly like to talk about are multi-binding, so the ability to bind to more than one variable at a time, some simple combination operators, the format combination operator, the if combination operator, calling value converters using a functional style, and then finally I'd like to talk about how all of this reflects back into the old world of Windows and XAML. So let's just kick into this, and in order to do that I've set up a simple project, and I'll just show you what this project looks like running. There's nothing particularly exciting in the view model or in the view, so I'll just show you what it looks like. And it should run up in this emulator. So the project is a simple form-based app. It enables you to choose a title, to enter a first name. So this is Mrs. Keith. Keith Shallows. And then when you've done that, there are other simple forms on this field, like accepting the terms. Once you've done that, you can hit add and you'll get a list item. If you add a few people, then that builds up very straightforwardly. Mr. Life Support. So you can see how we can build up a list. So that's the UI we're looking at. And we're not really going to use much around it other than I just want to show those 6 features and how we can build upon them using this Tibet binding. So Tibet binding is nothing revolutionary. It is a evolution on top of the previous syntax, which was called Swiss binding. So everything you've seen before should still work. So these bindings that you currently have in this UI should all look very familiar to you. So what we'd like to do is we would like to start experimenting with having some multi-bindings. So let me just add in a text view here and let me show you what a multi-binding looks like. So multi-bindings are typically for display only. It's very hard to do multi-bindings where you take multiple values into a single control, as a single value, and then somehow push those back to the view model. But they're pretty easy to use for actually combining together on the UI. So let's take our UI and let's add a text view here, and just to show you where it is, I'm going to make it quite large, and I'll make the is it just color I need to add in here, or is it text color? I'll make the text color into a nice bright yellow, so that you can see it. So there is our text color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bind this to a multi-binding. So what does a multi-binding look like? Well, a single binding just looks like this, text first name. A multi-binding adds in another variable like last name. And that will at runtime evaluate. So it's important to realize this isn't a C# compilation. This is a reflection-based evaluation. So it's a little bit slower than compilation. But if it's just a small part of the UI you're updating, it's a reasonable way of going about it. And so what we can do also is we can put in some literals. So here's a string in a space in there, and we can combine together a lot more things as well if we want to. So you could, for example, actually combine together. You'd want the title in here, so you could combine in title, and then at runtime, if we run this one up, that should all get evaluated successfully, I hope, in this yellow color, which again I hope shows up okay on the simulator. So now we've added that in. If we start to combine these things in, and we don't see what we did, it's because I had a syntax error. So you do get syntax errors, and you can see it's complaining about the syntax. And so that was a bad first demo for the binding. But you can see, hopefully now I've fixed that little syntax error. But when we run this up, we should get our yellow line. And so now if I start combining these things together and change it to Mr., and this is going to be Mr. Red Devil, then you can see, oops, devil, you can see, I hope, how that multi-binding is being updated while we're working. So that's a multi-binding. Within it you can see we've also put some string literals. Within it we've also put these plus operators which allow you to add things together. Other operators that are available for strings, there aren't many others, it's mainly this plus type operator. For numbers you can also use some arithmetic operators, but you do have to be careful about the ordering of those because the evaluation of them will go right to left if you do it. So it's best for now, as we're easing our way into this new world of Tibet binding, just stick with things like strings when you need to combine these together, because that's really the type of effect you're looking for on screen with these multi-bindings anyway. So that's a first little look at it, at doing these things. I also said that I wanted to show you some simple combination operators. Well, there you are, some simple combination operators. I said I wanted to show you format, so let me show you some format. And format is a simple operation, so what we'll do is underneath the yellow, I'm just going to pull this size down a little bit so it fits a bit better on the screen. Underneath the yellow we will add a, I can't remember if this is cyan or magenta or one of those similar colours. We'll add another one of these. And what we'd like to do here is the same effect, but we'd like to use a format string. So what you can do is you can use a format string like this, bracket 0, brackets 1, and you know it's exactly the same syntax, and it is actually the C# syntax that will be used under the covers. It'll be the string format, but it'll be used via some reflection evaluation, so it's not quite as fast as compiled string format. And so now we should hopefully see, so this is a multi-binding that's using the format combination, and if we run this one up, hopefully you will see that underneath the yellow one we'll get this, whichever colour it is, a cyan or something, shown on screen, and it should give us the same string just with a, you know, this syntax here. So hopefully this runs up. Says deploy succeeded. Not sure it is running though. Let me try again. Okay, so it's running up. Let's see what happens. Apologies for the fan if that's interfering with the sound recording. It is, as I say, a very hot day here. And it appears that we may have lost our debugger. Let me just see if there's any error output. I think I may just have lost debugger, that's all. So let's just do a set of startup, F5. May have to turn off fast deployment. Let's see. Okay, so now it's run up. And again, if we choose a doctor and we choose a first name here, life, no hardware keyboard, doctor life support, then hopefully you can see that both of those strings are being evaluated similarly. There's a small difference in terms of a space, and that is the format operator being used. If you had a number here, or you had a boolean, or you had some other flag for, you know, date time or something, you can use exactly the same syntax here as you're used to using. So, you know, if it was a date, you could do date, 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 month, month, year, year, year. In order to put these, if it's a number, you could do, you know, your normal 0.00 to show you number of decimal places, that sort of thing for your formatting. So it's just a simple way of doing that, and that's really what I'd like to encourage people to think about these multi-bindings. They're not really for very complex operations. For anything that is business important, you should really still be keeping that in your view models. It's just for simple things where you might want to put these bindings in the UI rather than putting them in the view models, because it is more convenient to put them here. Okay, so that's the format operator. The next thing I said I'd like to look at is if. So let me just show you an if. And an if, we're going to have to be a bit contrived here to show you an if. But let me put the if above both of those others. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to do an if evaluation. And if here is a bit like an old, if you've ever done Excel spreadsheets or anything like that, or old VBA programming or anything, then if was always like the if, test the condition, and then you have the if true, do this half, or if it's the if false, you do this half. So that's what if is in terms of here. And so what we're going to do is we are going to put a condition here. So let's put a condition that's quite advanced. So we would like to have if the first name, let's use our accepted field. So we've got a flag down there which is accepted. And so if accepted, I'd like to put the first name here. Otherwise, I'd like to put the last name here. So we can put this down below our accepted field. Let me just put that in there so that you can see it. Obviously, this isn't very useful in terms of this UI, but that's how we're going to do it. So this is going to be a multi-binding to 3 different properties, and it will update when any of those 3 update. We'll give it a different color again, just to show it distinctly on the screen. And we should see that when we change the check statements, we'll get the first name or the last name appropriately. So let's run this one up. Slowly it's copying across to the emulator. So let's enter a first name of Ian and a last name of Hope. And what we should see here is, if we don't have the terms accepted, we should have the last name. If we do have them, we'll have the first name. Last name, first name. Last name, first name. So you can see that's a very simple binding using the if statement. You could obviously, if you wanted to, combine these things together. So let me just show you that as well. So what you could do is you could have the, if you would like to have the first name, then you could do it this way. So if accepted, then we'll have first name, comma last name. If not, and I've got to get my brackets right here, we will have format, and we will do brackets, comma, let's do brackets 1. And what we will have here is title. Oops. So there's no IntelliSense here, as you can see. I've got to be very careful in the way I type. But you can see how this, hopefully you can see we've got an if statement, it's testing accepted. If accepted is true, we're going to evaluate that format, which is going to use first name and last name. If accepted is false, we're going to evaluate this second one. Now this is already slightly inefficient because I can already see that if last name changes in the view model, we might actually cause this to be evaluated twice. So it's a little bit inefficient, but again, you've just got to be careful of that as you build up your expressions. Don't start repeating things too much, but overall it shouldn't impact your usability very much. So let's just see this build up. Hopefully it will run. I didn't make any typos during it. But we should be able to see again if we pass in a first name of Jim and a last name of Bowen. Then we should see down here we've got none Bowen. Let me give him a title just so he's got something more exciting. So Dr. Jim Bowen. And now you can see if we accept the terms, we get the other expression evaluated. So that's, nested evaluation of these multi-bindings. Hopefully that's quite readable to anyone who's coming along and looking at the code. And hopefully you can see, how you would build these things up. Again, as I must keep stressing, don't put too much logic into your views, but you can put small amounts here which help you with your usability. You can also, if you want to, this wasn't quite on the script that I said I'd go through, so we looked at format, we looked at if. You can also, if you want to, actually put other types of binding expressions in here and evaluations. So there are, for example, greater than and less than operators you could use. There are also some ands and ors for logical combinations. I think I'll come back to those another day. I think for this very first introduction, this is probably enough just to get people thinking about how these things might tie together. Okay, so those are the first four. The next thing was function style value converter calling. So let me add a value converter to our core project. And so we'll do that as we've always done it in the past. Let me just zoom in a bit to give you a more larger size. And so we're going to add a value converter, and let's just stick with a standard value converter, a length value converter. And what we will do is we'll inherit from MvvmX value converter. And we'll make that string to int. Use resharper to pull that in as a namespace. And we will just override the one direction, the convert direction. And if value is null, we'll return 0. Otherwise, we'll return value.length. So that's our very simple value converter. By compiling it, we know we'll get that straight into our namespace. So we can, for example, now in first view model if we wanted to. As you've always seen, you can, if you need to, just put in, and I'll add another text view here. Let me add the text view just below, for example, the first name. So this is going to be now our classic value converter, and our classic value converter in Swiss binding always look like this. Converter equals length. And you could see that that's how we always set up in the past our value converters. And I'll give this one yet another unusual color. Hopefully we won't run out too soon. You can see that's how we've always seen our value converters in the past. So let me just show you that running. Debug start new. So that should be running up, and if we start typing in our first, then I have done something wrong. Just see what I've done wrong. It was called len, lot length. That's what I've done wrong. So my classic value converter, it's gone wrong. So the problem was that it was called len, so that's what I have to call it. Debug start new, and that will show us, I hope, why we get our value converter applied. So you can see now we've got a length of 0, and if we start typing, then we get our len coming through. However, that syntax is still available to you, and it's still familiar to those of you who use Windows binding. But we decided, and we looked at perhaps changing it so that instead of calling it in that kind of Swiss way, we could call it like a function like this. And so we decided to allow this function declaration. Obviously, there are some reserved words like if, like format, like add, and I will be publishing the list of kind of default ones in the coming weeks. But for now, as long as you're calling your value converter something like len or any of these other names, there's quite a lot out there, then you can just use this syntax. So let's just show this running. So you can see now that if we start typing, it still works. And obviously with this syntax, you don't have to stick to such a simple thing. You can, if you want to, actually combine it together with a string literal and perhaps with another variable like last name. And if we do that, then hopefully you can see that now we get the length on the screen, the value converter applied to the whole of that input. So when this runs up, you should see that we've got length of 1 because we've got the string literal in there. And if we start typing in here, you can see it goes up. And if we start typing in there, you can see it also goes up. So that's a very simple value converter applied to a multi-binding, including a string literal. We can also, if you want to, have written that another way. So we could have written that as len first name plus 1 plus len last name, and that would have worked. So that's a multi-binding using 2 value converters and a numeric literal. The result of this will actually be a long, so be a bit careful again if you start doing maths in these guys. This will be a long, and I will also show you a little quirk of the way this is evaluated, just as a warning about how you need to be a bit careful when you start doing numbers in this statement. So let's set this up, and again hopefully you'll just see, you know, it starts as 1, we start typing there, it goes up, we start typing there, it goes up. So that's cool. But let's also just show that if we had, instead of a plus, used a minus here, then this would be evaluated left to right. Yeah, it would be, sorry, it'd be pars left to right. So it would be evaluated as len, and then it would be evaluated as plus 1 minus this, and that's how it would be evaluated. So if we, underneath this, put another similar sentence, then your C# brain will probably tell you that these things are equivalent. But actually they are, because these are being evaluated using a interpreter, these are very different. So these 2 lines, this one here of len plus 1 minus len, is different to this one of len minus len plus 1, because this one is going to be evaluated right, going to be interpreted right to left. So parsed left to right, interpreted right to left. So it's going to be different to the one above. And just to show you that in action, let's again just show you that. So just beware of this, you know, it shouldn't come up because you shouldn't be building too big a set of expressions in your UI, but it might if you start doing, you know, some complicated evaluation. So let's just see this. So you can see already we've got a 1 and a -1, which is the difference. And as we keep typing, then both of them bound, but they're always going to be 2 apart. Actually, no, they're not because of the thing. So, you know, that's a warning about. Don't try and be too careful with these, but overall you should, you know, not hit that too often. We can also, if you need to, combine this a bit further. So let's take this expression, and what we'd like to do is we would like to do that. We, you know, perhaps you'd like to do the classic Twitter type calculation. So you'd like to know how much room you've got left of your 140. And so you can do that using an expression like this. So it's 140 minus the length of the first name plus the 1 plus that, all added together, subtracted from 140, and that will show you how much room you've got left. Let me just delete the other one because you don't really need to see that anymore. Oops, one line too many. And we can show you that in action as well. Again, you could combine this into 1 value converter, and it's probably better to do that because it'll be more testable. But, you know, for quick prototyping, there's definitely a win here in terms of just putting this into the view. So let me see if this runs up. It looks like a failure inside. Monodroid to start running. You can see. Looks like I have a problem with Monodroid. Let me close that down. And unless, whoops, don't know what happened there. Close that down, and hopefully I will be able to restart it. So we should be up and running, and you can see now immediately that we've got 1 character taken away, and as we start typing in, you know, this gives us our Twitter limit of how many more characters are left. So, you know, from that point of view, it's quite useful just to see how you might start building up these expressions in UI. Okay, so that's most of these points I said I'd cover. Function style, value converter calling, if format, some simple combinations. I could also just show you briefly that, you know, you could add an enabled property to your ad. So for example, this button at the moment is our thing. We can also add to the enabled, and we could, you know, perhaps say that we would like the this to be enabled if first name if the len of first name is greater than 0. Obviously, because we're in inside XML here, we can't just use greater than, because that's a closing tag, so we have to use escaping and greater than 0. We then would like to AND that, but again we have to put in AND semicolon and semicolon, because we're in inside we're inside this XML. And then we would like to AND that with last name being greater than 0, and we would probably, just for completeness, like to AND that with the enabled flag, or the what was it, the accepted flag being set. So let's just AND that as well. So here's accepted, and let's run that up, and we can show you that binding. It's not as pretty as syntax by all means when you start having to escape these things. But hopefully you as experienced engineers will see it. Hopefully we can see that's not enabled at the moment. Or is it? Just see enabled length and len of last name is greater than. That certainly should be disabled. I can't see from that it looks disabled. Have I run this correctly? So enabled. Just separate this out for my own sanity so I can see what's going on. And accepted. So, it's very easy if you do hit this barrier to find out what the status is, just by adding another text view. So we can actually use like this text view up above. And we will just put this down here. And so that's our text expression that we'd like to evaluate. So let's just see what that is evaluating to. Run it up again. It's copying application to device. So I hope it'll be running any moment. It looks like I'm having problems with my mono droid. Let me just turn off fast debugging, because that always is a fast deployment. It always seems to cause problems. There's a very black screen at the moment, which is a bit worrying. You kill the emulator and try again. So, while that starts up, hopefully you've seen a few of the things that I said I'd try and show you. You've seen some multi-binding, you've seen some simple combination operators, you've seen format, you've seen if, you've seen function style value converters. But hopefully you've also seen some of the dangers of actually looking at this, because hopefully you've seen that it's not always, this really looks quite dead as an emulator. It's not always straightforward to debug these things in the UI, and so they might have been better as back-end type things. I'm afraid it looks like my emulator has died. It doesn't seem to be very alive at all. So I think what I might do is just stop there and show you it running on touch. So we've got the same UI on touch, and apologies that that's just stopped working on Droid altogether. And on touch, if I just show you what it looks like in the UI, you can see we've got a first view, and it's all created in code. We can run that up, and I probably need to run my VNC viewer, connect across, password, and I can tell you it's running, but we're just going to have to wait while I log in again. I do believe it might be my video card has died. Oh no, here we go. So let's just log in again. And we should now be able to see. So you've got this UI where you can, select a title, Mr. You can type your first name, Stuart. You can add a lodge. And this is just the conventional binding. If you hit OK, then you can get Stuart in the list. So that's cool. But what we can then do is come back to the UI and we can show you some of these multi-bindings. Now, we don't really have the fluent style quite as nicely for multi-binding, but you can still use it. So let's add in another view, and let's add in this view just beneath the switch. So we're going to have to overrun here a bit. So this is going to be called a debug view, and it's going to be a new UI label. We're going to add it at 10. Let's add it at 130. We're just going to overwrite where the button is. So label 130, 10, 100. We'll make it 330. That's cool. And so we will just overwrite where the button is. This will be our debug view. And then let's just show you how we can use some of those same things as we've been using inside our core project, inside our Droid project. So let's start by binding our debug view. And what we're going to bind it to is we'd like to bind it to some of the things we've been binding. So to do this, we're just going to use strings for now to show you how to do that. So let's start by saying that we'd like our debug view to show first name plus space plus last name. And you can see that's the way it's put together. So you don't have this nice syntax for this. You don't have, expression based, you just have strings. If we run that up, then hopefully we should see debug view. It's going across to our Mac. It's deploying. And if we now start typing in Fred and Flintstone, then you can see how that's being shown in our debug view here. So that's a very simple multi-binding. Let's show you the format one working. So what we could do is we could put in here a format expression, and so we'll put in a format with a similar type of thing, curly brace 1. We'd like to have the gender in there as well, so let's do brackets 2. Not gender, title it, isn't it? And then the syntax for that would be first name, comma, last name, comma, gender, title. I don't know where I got gender from suddenly in my brain. And you can see again there's no help with making sure all your quotes match and your brackets match or anything. So it's easy to make mistakes, but hopefully we didn't make any there. And so when we deploy it this time, we should see that format coming through. So if you're looking at this and you're thinking this is disgusting, I don't want to use it, then that's cool. That's exactly what you should be thinking as solid engineers who want to share as much of your code cross-platform. If, however, you're thinking, oh, that looks like a dirty hack that might come in handy, that's also cool. So if we're typing Mr. Barney Rubble, you can see how that is coming through here in our debug view. Yep. So that's our second little demonstration. If we wanted to combine that further and put it inside an if, then you can see how we can put that inside an if. Let's just use the accepted property in order to determine what to put. And if it's true, then we'll use our first one. If it's false, then let's just put a literal string in there saying nada. So again, we should be able to run that up, unless I've made a mistake, and you can see, it's a fairly readable syntax to actually put those things in. Hopefully it's going across and deploying on the Mac. It's running up. And so if we choose you can see it says nada all the time here. And it doesn't matter what you're typing in here, it's still saying nada. Mr. Red Hand, I guess. And it's only when we actually flick the switch that you can see the binding kicks in and pushes the contents across to the other format statement. So hopefully you can see that's there. Sorry, I managed to click on the button then. So that's a quick demonstration of those things. We can also put length in here because we've got this length value converter. You saw it here, a len value converter. And actually let me just do another one. So you can also pass in value converter parameters if you want to. So let's call this the strip value converter. And this is going to be a value converter that is going to go from a string to a string. And what we're going to do here is we're going to override convert, What we'd like is we'd like that parameter to convert to be a string. So we'll call it the var param string equals parameter as string. And then if value equals null or param string equals null, then we'll just return value. Otherwise, what we're going to return is we're going to return value dot replace, or value dot replace is as good as anything. And what we'll do is replace value string with an empty string. So anything that's in that param string we can replace. So we can build that up, and then we should have strip available to us in the UI. So we'll go back to first view, and here where we've got this complicated expression, what I'll do is I'll just comment that out and I'll use a new one, set.bind, and we'll do a debug view, and we're going to bind this to, and let's bind this to a first name, and let's just say that what we have decided is we've decreed that we no longer like the letter S, because S is just not a letter that we are prepared to tolerate in the world. And so what we'll do is we'll strip first name, comma, S, and that should, let's do it for last name as well. Obviously that's a capital S. If you need to have a lowercase s as well, you probably have to put 2 strip statements in to get this working. But you can see that that's going to be our first name plus our last name, no spaces or anything, both stripped. So let's run this one up, and hopefully you'll see strip being used. Cross on the Mac. So we should now see that if we type Tim or Tom, then we just get Tom, no worries. But if you type Stuart, then you see we don't get anything. And if you type Stuart again, you'll see you get nothing. And if you type S again, you get nothing. If you were to use a lowercase s, you'd get it, no worries. But as soon as you type an uppercase S, that gets stripped out. So that is a very simple way to get the value converter into the code, and it looks reasonable as a statement if you're trying to understand what is going on. So that is value converter, the name, the strip, the binding expression, and then the command, the parameter that's going into the value converter. Okay, so that's those things. Let me just see what else I said. So format we've shown on touch, if we've shown, simple combination we've shown a little of, and function style value converters. So the last thing is, how would you do any of this inside Windows environments? And the answer is that to get this working, you can't use built-in binding. So what you have to use instead is our own MvvmCross binding. And to do that, you go to NuGet, and there's a package here called Binding Extensions for Windows Only, and you install it. And when you've installed it, you then have to do a little bit of setup. And to do that, what you do is you override a method called initialize last chance, and in there what you do is you create, and I'll just zoom in a little so you can see this, you create a builder, and a builder is a new MVX Windows binding builder. And you've always had one of these in Android and in iOS. It's always obviously been a Android or an iOS binding builder, and it's just been done for you. And all you have to do is call do registration on it. And once you've done that, then you should actually have our bindings available to you in first view. So let's just go through and we'll convert this to use MVX bindings. So let's just show you that, and I'll just swap these windows around. So to start with, we have these 2 bindings in our combo box, and we can replace those. If we just type bi.nd, then hopefully you get IntelliSense offering you MVX : for that, and then the expression is exactly what you would expect from your Android and your iOS work. So what you would put in here is you would say you want to bind your item source to your titles, and you would like to bind your selected item to your titles. You don't need the 2-way because we're going to sort that out for you, and that's just the replacement, just done. Similarly, if you want to bind, or that's not a bound thing, so you don't want to do that, but if you want to bind your text box, then you can just use another MVX bind, an attached property if you're looking for what this is, And again, what you'd say here is that you want to bind this thing's text to first name. And what you will actually notice is for text boxes we bind directly, so we bind character by character, key press by default. So you have to be a bit aware that it's going to bind kind of in the same way as Android and iOS rather than in the normal Windows way. And you also notice you don't need the mode equals two-way here, because by default we always set up two-way binding, mainly because I always forget it, so that's why I've put it in there as the default. And so then we have this checkbox, so we know the checkbox has an isChecked property, and we're going to bind that to accepted. So hopefully you can see how these bindings are just being replaced. We've got a button and it's got a command, so we're going to bind its command instead. And you may think, these look horrible. That's cool if you think these look horrible. Doesn't bother me too much. If you prefer the curly brace, it's still there available to you. You just can't do multi-bindings as easily or anything like that with them. And then down the bottom here we also have our list box, and our list box has this binding for the item source. Oops, you see if you have a typo then it won't pick it up on it, so you have to be a bit more careful, but there you go. So we bound our item source, and I won't change those within there, but they can all be changed the same way. So if we run this one up, we just set this as the default. And if we run this up, F5, then you should see, hopefully, unless I forgot something, these should still be bound in exactly the same way as they were. Miss Dr. Stuart Lodge. I've promoted myself, accepted, add, and you can see it all binds exactly as before. So once you've made that change and you're using our bindings, and you can mix and match a bit there as you've seen. Once you've made that change, you can then start to add other things in. So let's add another text block in, and we'll add that here. And what we'll do is we'll just make this text block stand out a bit just before the add button, and we'll give it a foreground color of yellow just so you can see it. And what we'll do is we're going to bind to this guy, bi.nd equals, and what we're going to do is just show you that multi-binding. It won't work again, so all we'll do is we'll bind to first name plus, we need to bind the text property to first name plus last name. And we can run that up, and hopefully we'll see that yellow field in there. So if you start typing in Fred, no, we don't see it. Why don't we see it? Let's just check what I did wrong. So we are binding here text to the first name plus that plus last name. Doesn't give me any trace. Let me just check that it did actually rebuild it. Doesn't seem to be starting the debugger. Still a bit worried that we have some issues left over from that Android, but let's just see. So now we've got a bit more of a space, have we? Okay, so now hopefully if we type Fred and Flintstone, you can see the yellow binding here. See this field is being updated live. Whoops. So that is our multi-binding working. And if we were to make that a bit more complicated, we could do that. So let's use a format. So we could use text, and we could say we'd like to format this text with use the same string as we've used before. So curly brace 0, curly brace 1, normal bracket, curly brace 2, and that will use first name, last name, and title. Then that again should hopefully run up. I think it might be because I've got iPhone Simulator as my build target. So again, if we then choose Dr. Harold Webb, then you can see that binding is in full motion there. So that's a format string binding, which is fully portable across all three platforms now and working the same way and across the same binding engine. But let us also add, an if statement in there just to show you if in action. And so what we'll do again is we'll just do if, but we'll do it the other way around. So if accepted, then we will have the format there. Otherwise we will have a string which says nothing to see here. So again, if we run that up, we should see format and if working together. So there's nothing to see here still, no matter what I type, until I hit that accepted, and then you get the right expression through. So that's format and if being used. Then the last little thing to show you is these custom value converters. Now if you were to pull in here, and I'll just do another line just so we can see it. If you were to pull in here, we'll use pink. If you're trying to use len, I'll just, let's use len of that format string, then what you would quickly discover is that this won't work. So let's just show you it not working. It's not going to be the most exciting thing, it just doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work, as you can see, there's nothing here. No matter what I type, we don't get any binding in there. And the reason it doesn't work is it does tell you down here that it's got problems binding to it. And the reason it's not working is because it doesn't know how to pull in the len. So to pull it in, the easiest way is to go to the app project, the app file, and here where you have your resource dictionaries, then just add in another one. And what you want to do is you want to import from a library. And the library you want to import from is the core. So it's an NVX import, and inside it you want to tell it where you're importing from. So you do an MvvmCross import from .from, and in here, inside it, you actually have to say, give it a type, give it an instantiable type that you can actually do. So normally to do this, what I'll do is inside the app, or somewhere nearby, I'll just put a helper class, and I'll call this just, the resource loader helper. And it's just a public class with a public constructor, and it's got no functionality in it whatsoever. It just sits there like this. And what it means is that back in the, and I'll just make sure it built by doing that, but back in the store project in the app.xaml, inside here I can actually just add a resource loader helper. And with that added, that will actually get imported at runtime. So if I build this up, hopefully it should get rid of these underlines. What's it saying? What have I got wrong? It's because I haven't added a key to here, so I just need to add a key. So I'll give it an x : key equals import core project. And with that done, hopefully, it's probably still complaining about a build, but should be okay. Let's just see. Okay, so that's now built. And with that now done, the len should be available to us. So let's just check. So you can see there's the length of 8. I can't remember what that's the length of, but I'll have to check. It's the length of the title plus the string, so we can change it just by changing what's going on here. And that's our value converter pulled in without having to do any of that native value converter stuff you normally see me struggling with. And finally, I'll just also add in, because I think as well as the len, we had that trim. So let's just show you that. What was it called? It was called in the first view model, we added the strip value converter. So as well as that, we can use strip if you want to. So let me just add strip to first name, and again, I'll just remove the letter S. And you can see how complicated these expressions are that we're building up here. I don't recommend you go that complicated with your expressions, but it is there for you to do if you want to. So we're just going to strip the capital S out of first name. So if I just click on that as well, then we can hopefully see, if I start typing S, nothing comes through for capitals, but any other letter will come through, and obviously last name works as normal. So that is our, functionality put together. It's our value converters pulled in as well. If you wanted to pull in more libraries, perhaps you have a complete collection of libraries where you want to pull in value converters from, then you can just do it using another import statement, as long as basically it'll import any value converter it finds in the same library as that helper class. So that's it. I think I went through quite a lot there. I didn't show you Windows Phone or WPF, they work very similarly to Windows Store. But just to go over again what I hope I've shown you, you can now do multi-binding. There are some simple combination operators like plus, minus, multiply, divide, greater than, less than. However, be very careful with them because they don't evaluate in the normal C# way, they evaluate in this interpreter way, and it's quite often right to left with no kind of operator precedence, so be careful with them. But they are there and they are very useful. There's format, there's if, there's these different ways of calling value converters using a functional style syntax. And as well as being available in Touch and Droid, it's also available in XAML. Okay, that was a very unusual N+1. I hope I didn't explain it too badly. Sorry about the problems with the Android emulator. Whatever my graphics card is dying. I'm sorry about the fan noise from my computer, but it is very warm here in London. And I hope that it's at least amused you seeing the new Tibet bindings. What I'll try and do next is at some point I'll try and talk through Rio, which is the friend of Tibet. And Rio is another set of new functionality. And I'll talk through that tomorrow. It's about changing the view models rather than changing the views. So I'll try and talk about that soon, and I hope n = 35 wasn't too confusing. Over and out.